I remember the first time I heard about Lake Miro, a hidden gem not too far from town. It was the kind of place that made you forget the world outside, with its gentle waters and whispering trees. My friends and I would set up tents along its banks and tell stories while roasting marshmallows. It was our peaceful retreat. That summer, though, the peace and tranquility of our favorite lake would come to an end. It started as a whisper among the older kids that at 3 a.m., Lake Miro changed from its serene facade to a ghostly-like glow. Not from the moonlight shining on water that we were used to, they said, but an eerie luminescence rising from the depths. A mixture of fear and excitement bubbled inside me, and I couldn't shake it off. So my friends, Tommy and Stacy, agreed to set up camp with me and stay up to witness this phenomenon for ourselves. On the fateful night, we set up camp and huddled by the fire, watching the minutes tick closer to 3 a.m. I can't say what I was expecting, but when the time came, the sight was nothing short of strange. The lake began to glow with an uncanny light that seemed alien. We were drawn to it, as if the light had some sort of power over us, pulling us closer to the shore. Peering over the edge, I expected to see my own wide-eyed face looking back at me. But what stared back was not me, or at least not any version of me I recognized. The face in the water had my features, but twisted into a grotesque, devilish version. Panic clawed at my chest, urging me to run. But as I tried to step backward, the warped reflection rose out of the water with clawing hands. The last thing I remember before the icy grip pulled me under was the sound of my own scream and the echo of Tommy and Stacy's in sync with mine. As those ghostly hands clutched me, instinct and adrenaline surged through my veins. I kicked and thrashed against the cold, icy water, pulling away from what was pulling me deeper under. And then, just when my lungs felt ready to burst, I broke free. I erupted from the lake's surface, gasping for air. Stacy burst up from the water to my left, then Tommy to my right. We pulled each other out of the water and dragged our suddenly tired, frozen bodies onto the mud at the edge of the lake. Looking back at the lake, we watched the eerie light dissipate, as if our escape had broken some sort of spell. Drenched and scared, we scrambled back to our campsite, constantly glancing over our shoulders in fear that whatever we saw in the lake's reflections wasn't following us. We gathered a handful of our belongings, jumped into my car, and drove home as fast as we could. The three of us never returned to Lake Miro again. Till this day, if I'm awake at the hour of 3 a.m., I can feel the horror and chill of that night pierce through my body. That night, under a sky that looked like a vast blanket sprinkled with tiny lights, our campsite was the best spot we had ever found. It felt like a secret hideout for me and my friends, Sarah, Liam, and Zoe. Nestled between giant trees, it was the perfect setting for an adventure. We were tired of our usual hangouts, so that night, we ventured deeper into the forest than we ever had before. The air was incredibly fresh, filled with the scents of pine trees and damp earth, an awesome smell that makes you want to keep breathing it in forever. After walking a couple of miles, we arrived at the perfect spot to spend the night. We set up our tents quickly and started a fire, our laughter and jokes filling the air as we anticipated the night ahead. We couldn't wait to exchange scary stories and enjoy loads of toasted marshmallows. Liam took charge of dinner, handling the food as if he were a born chef, while the girls and I focused on the campfire. Zoe collected dry sticks and leaves, and Sarah carried over the larger logs we'd need to sustain the fire. I was on match duty. We cleared a small circle on the ground, careful to keep it at a safe distance from anything flammable. Zoe arranged the dry leaves and twigs in the center, crafting a nest-like base for our fire, and I carefully struck a match. Watching the tiny flame flicker to life, I took a deep breath and touched it to the kindling. The fire caught with a small, satisfying whoosh. Sarah strategically placed the smaller logs over the burgeoning flames, constructing a teepee structure that allowed the air to circulate and the fire to grow. Working together, we fed the fire until it roared and crackled, casting a golden light on our faces. It became the heart of our campsite, a beacon in the wilderness, its scent of burning wood mingling with Liam's cooking to create the perfect ambiance for a wilderness adventure. As darkness enveloped us, our little fire fought back the night, providing a sense of safety and protection. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, accompanied by the occasional crackling laugh from the fire. But as the night progressed and we grew weary, an intense quiet settled around us. The usual sounds of the forest tapered off, and the fire's crackle became a soothing lullaby. Liam yawned first, signaling the end of his tales, while Sarah's voice grew softer with each word. Zoe, already nestled in her sleeping bag, fought to keep her eyes open. Deciding it was bedtime, Liam took great care in extinguishing the fire, ensuring every last ember was smothered. We all understood the importance of fire safety in the woods. Using water from our bottles, we stirred the ashes until we were certain that the fire was completely out. Retreating to our tents, Sarah and I shared one, while Liam and Zoe had their own. Inside, our flashlights cast amusing shadows on the canvas walls as we prepared for bed. Sarah's hushed voice noted how the shadows resembled dancing monsters, which made me chuckle, despite the chilling silence from outside. The world outside the tent seemed to disappear as we settled into the night. I zipped up my sleeping bag and listened to the soft, rhythmic breathing of my friends, the only indication that I wasn't alone in the vast forest. It was a struggle to drift off to sleep. The stillness around us was both eerie and tranquil. Eventually, sleep did come, and we were enveloped by the silent, watchful woods. Suddenly, the serenity was shattered by a sharp crack, startling Sarah and me from our slumber. The cozy security we had felt moments ago vanished. Our wide eyes met in the dimness. Though we attempted to smile, the fear was palpable. "Probably just an animal," I whispered, trying to believe it myself. The tent's flimsy fabric seemed an inadequate barrier against the unknown outside. We lay still, listening for any further sounds, but none came. Reassured, we snuggled back into our sleeping bags, trying to find the comfort of sleep once again. Yet, I remained alert, half expecting the forest to intrude upon our safety. Then, louder and nearer than before, the sound returned. Something was out there, its movements intentional. The noise was of something heavy being dragged around our campsite. I bolted upright, Sarah's grip on my arm tightening. Her eyes were enormous with fear, and she scooted behind me without a word. Our tent felt as if it was filled with the thick, tangible dread. An urge to cry out to Liam and Zoe was stifled by the overwhelming need for silence. Approaching the tent flap with trembling hands, I hesitated, torn between the need to see and the fear of what might be revealed. Taking a deep, involuntary breath, I tugged at the zipper, which screamed in the silence of the night. We froze, anticipating a response from the darkness. But nothing happened, and the silence returned, and I dared to peer through a small gap. The moon glowed faintly over the ashes of the washed-out fire. There it was, at the edge of the dim light. A towering figure, its head nearly touching the tree branches. It had the shape of a person, but distorted, with elongated arms dangling at its sides. Its body was narrow, resembling a shadow given form. Slowly, it pivoted its head and looked straight at me, its eyes glowing like two small dim orbs. My heart seized. It saw me. It was aware of me watching it. Paralyzed, I could only watch as we faced each other, his eyes piercing me with a twisted gaze. Then, as effortlessly as a whisper is carried away by the wind, it turned and dissolved into the darkness. "What is it?" Sarah's voice was a breathy murmur against my ear, barely audible, but I had no answer. I didn't know. I zipped the tent closed, and we sat in whispering silence. Sleep was an impossibility for the remainder of the night. We merely waited for the sun's rise. As the first light of morning began to wash away the terrors of the night, Sarah and I made a pact. Even as the forest returned to its daytime melody, we carried the secret of our silent visitor with us, choosing never to mention it to Liam and Zoe, to protect them, maybe, or perhaps to deny that it had ever happened at all.